Naima, and today we have our special guest, Miss Caitlin Rose of Caitlin Rose Yoga. She is a yoga teacher and somatic practitioner. So welcome. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are
Good.
you?
Can't
Haven't
complain.
talked to
It's
you in so
raining here.
long.
Yeah, I
It
know.
raining? Yeah.
But so I wanted to have you on because I feel like people have their own misconceptions of yoga or just generally don't really know what it is, why they should do it. So what actually is yoga? Like, how would you define it?
So yoga, the practice I'd say is a practice that helps you connect with your body and mind. So definitely an integration of that. It's also a practice of, the ethics, like truth, practicing awareness. And it has other practices within that, like meditation, asana, which is the physical poses. There's also sister sciences like Ayurveda, which is health, and then astrology is also a sister science of yoga as well. So there's a lot of different branches of yoga, but ultimately, I would say it's an integration of mind and body. Other styles of yoga, like Tantra, would say yoga is the practice that helps. It uses the body as a tool to connect to higher states of consciousness. So you basically using the body as a tool
To
for
channel.
awareness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um, yeah, so it's different. There's different like aspects of it. It's a lot more than the physical poses, but it's definitely a lifestyle and it's definitely like a spiritual practice for sure.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's kind of like with Reiki, like it's not just doing energy work, it's also having like a code of ethics, like you were saying, and kind of daily practice is a big part of it.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
a yoga like it comes from like in tantra. The tantras were scriptures, and they included practices like meditation, mantras, and then there's the Vedas that are it like has a lot of other philosophy, other stories, even mythology. Like it goes. It's been around for so long, so it really is a deep practice.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel
There's
like
definitely
it's not
different
something we
parts
can
you can study.
Yeah, yeah. So while we're kind of on that topic, so the most controversial thing I've been hearing lately from, these fanatic kind of Christian groups is that yoga is like a religion and that it's demonic because the different poses summon entities. What do you think about that?
Well, yoga is a practice. It's said that if you practice yoga, you can increase psychic ability, like intuition. So that could be one reason why it's viewed as demonic. There's also I wouldn't say it's scripture, but the Kama Sutra, I think it's called. It's associated with Tantra yoga, but it's not
It's
Tantra
like
yoga.
more sexual
And it talks about
aspect.
like sexual positions. I think certain poses, maybe I could be wrong. So that could be another reason why people say that, but the poses in general is supposed to activate the chakras, the energy. Every pose represents the chakras, right? Each one. So that could also be, or it's supposed to like there could be like one like mountain pose or Bahastasana is for the root chakra.
Mm,
It's grounding pose. So when you're working with those, that could be considered maybe demonic because it's working with energy and it's increasing intuitive ability. There are books that say that if you were to practice yoga, yeah, you can gain psychic ability, which could be
okay.
used for good or bad. And, it depends on what you believe, I guess. And then yoga is based in Hinduism, and there's different gods and goddesses, like, other religions
Mhm.
up, in mythology as well. So that could also be why it's seen as demonic. But it's interesting because a lot of the gods and goddesses in Hinduism, like it's the same god and goddess, it's just different faces of the same.
Mm.
So, but I would say that's probably why. But a lot of the occult practices have been inspired through Tantra, actually, like Hermetic philosophy. So there is a connection between the occult and Tantra specifically. Tantra is like a very old practice of yoga. So that could also be why. Like when you read certain books, they'll say a lot of the practices today have been inspired by Tantra.
Okay, that
Because
makes a
even
lot of
like yeah, because astrology was a practice in the Eastern world, Vedic astrology, and
sense.
that's a sister science of yoga, and that's an old practice. And, that's been around for a long time. So astrology has to do with predictions as well, because if you start going into the house systems and the transits, you can make predictions, and that is going into psychic ability again. So, like, anything that goes into, like, I wanna say, like, not playing God, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it starts to be looked at as evil, I guess.
Yeah, which makes sense, unfortunately. But like I'm not saying I agree, but I understand kind of where they're coming from with that.
But it's interesting because even the Christian faith has been inspired by paganism. I don't know if you read
No,
about that.
yeah.
I'm sure you
Yeah. We
have.
can
So,
go into that with like Christmas, for instance, and like the
yeah,
Yule log and like the wreaths and shit.
yeah, exactly. My cousin has recently transitioned into paganism, and we were talking about that. And he was talking about yoga with me too, and his thoughts on Hinduism. But yeah, so those are my thoughts on it. That's why I think it's viewed as demonic, especially with the whole, like, if you practice yoga, you can increase your intuitive abilities. And sometimes that's a lot of, that's why people want to do it or drawn to it. They want to increase their intuition. Not
Well,
everybody.
so I wanted to ask, you're saying that doing yoga can increase your intuitive abilities. So is that from just being so present in the pose? Is it from more breath work, you like yoga practices? How exactly does it increase your intuition?
I'd say, like, when you meditate, it activates certain parts of the brain, like, there is studies that show this. I'm not exactly sure which parts of the brain, but I know that the breath work and meditation definitely has an effect on our body and our mind. I haven't met anyone that has said outright, like, "Oh, my intuition has increased since practicing yoga," but I think when you're grounded, you just become more sharper, like, mentally. And it's not so much about being psychic, it's just about, like, if you're more present and let's say you're not eating things that are kind of, like, making you diluted or foggy in the mind, you may have deeper dreams, you may have deeper insights. So I think it's not so doesn't have to be so mystical. I
Mhm.
mean, you can go there, I guess, but for the average person, I think it's just having, like, a sharper mind and the ability to make better decisions and to see things clearly and not be so, like, when we have these, like, cognitive distortions and, we project a lot on people, we're not able to see things for what they are, and I think when you're practicing yoga in terms of, like, the philosophy of it, like, you can get better at making better judgments, whether with yourself and others.
Mhm. Yeah, no, I really get that because when you're here right now, you just notice more things versus if I
Yeah,
was worried about yesterday or tomorrow, so I definitely understand that, yeah.
yeah.
So as far as, like, the ethics of it, could you share with us, like, kinda what those are?
So, I'd say, like, one would be being content, so that's one ethic. It's Or I think it's an observance. So there's observances and then there's ethics, but ultimately they go together. And then within both those things, one is being content. So, like, learning to be happy with what you have in terms of, like, let's say if you're focused on manifesting, not saying it's a bad thing, but if you're always focusing on getting the next thing, it takes you away from being content with what you have. Also being clean, whether it's in your house or in your mind,
Mhm.
being pure, like, in terms of relationships, like, trying not to, like, not saying that you can't have sex with someone right away, it's not about that, but it's about respecting the other person, like, not just seeing them as a sexual object,
Mhm.
seeing them as a potential friend or partner. So those are some examples of that. Also, like, having awareness, being able to study yourself, so that could be, like, your belief systems that are not really aligned or they're causing you to make bad decisions. So a lot of the ethics and a lot of the practices are just really about building awareness, whether it's in your environment or inside and out, basically.
Yeah, so it's just being, like, completely present here and just experiencing the now and enjoying it.
Yeah, and it's like well, not interesting, but, like, when you are into spirituality, at least for me, and at least I'm sure you can relate, like, being into fortune telling, not saying it's bad, but, like, I used to have a problem where I used to have, like, a OCD thing with psychics and astrology readings,
Mhm.
and I was doing that because I wanted control of the situation, and a lot of people that lack like or who need control tend to go towards those things. And
Mhm.
basically yoga is saying like, well, yoga does have astrology, yes, but aside from that, because that's not yoga, it's a sister science of it, but it really tells you to like not worry so much about things that you can't control, which is pretty, not basic, but it's pretty straight to the point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've practiced yoga once. I went somewhere and I practiced yin yoga, which I didn't even realize, but at the time I think I really needed it. And not to be one of those people, but I really did cry like while I was doing it, and pretty much
That
what
makes
it
sense.
was it was more like relaxing poses, but you had to like hold those poses, like for instance, maybe in the fetal position, and you're holding that pose for like 3 minutes, and it just forced me to like be in my body and really feel what I was feeling. And I just had this like inner child moment, and it just was so peaceful. So could you explain too, like the difference between yin and yang yoga?
So yin, you don't want to have much heat in the body. So you wouldn't do yin like you'd probably do yin like first thing when you get up.
Mm,
Like I when I teach, I do heated yoga, so I wouldn't do yin in the studio that I work at. Yang is more, I guess you can think of it as like feminine and masculine. I guess yin is more calm. You don't want a lot of heat in the body because that's not going to be good for the muscles. And then yang is more, I guess, like a vinyasa, like breath to movement, very more fast. And you want
mhm.
to bring it to the body. That's the whole
More
purpose.
active.
Yeah. So like yin, like you're staying in the poses for a long period of time,
Mhm,
but you're not trying to get too hot because when you get hot in the body, you can open up your muscles even more. But if you're staying in a pose for so long, you don't want to be too hot because you could overdo it in the body. But in general, like pigeon pose, that's the English name, but that is also a pose that you probably did, and that's in the hips, that area that you're talking about. We hold a lot of emotions in the hips, so a lot of people cry, a lot of people get emotional in those poses, so it's quite common for someone to cry, especially in a restorative or a yin practice, because you're staying in those poses for a longer period of time. And we do hold, and I'm sure you've read about this and talk about this, we hold a lot in the body.
mhm,
So, but like particularly the hips is very common, so it's interesting that you say that that happens in a yin class.
mhm. So
But
would
I
you say
do that
that's
with people.
yeah, do
Mhm.
you think that's less likely than in a yang practice that people would have these more emotional kind of breakthroughs?
They could still have emotional breakthroughs, because even in a vinyasa practice, which is basically breath to movement, it's a little faster. You're still doing restorative poses at the end anyway. You may not be in for just as long, but I've definitely felt like things come up in a yoga class for sure.
Mhm. So if
I think
somebody
with the
wanted to
yeah,
No, go ahead.
I was gonna say, I think with yin, because you're just so still, you just have more time to like notice things. It's not
Yeah.
like go, go, go.
Yeah, it's true. So if somebody wanted to get into yoga, like just to take a little class, not necessarily to get trained, how do you think they should go about it? Just find a local place, like the internet?
I recommend going in person. The thing with yoga, in terms of the asana, the physical practice, you just want to make sure you have your alignment right. Because even if you do it online, if the teacher isn't really describing like where your hips should be, where your foot alignment should be, you're not going to really get the best out of the poses. I wouldn't say you're going to get serious injury, but over time, it's just not good, like to do it, in the wrong way. You want to do it in the way that is you're meant to do it. So going in person would probably be the best thing, but you could definitely do it online. Just have a teacher that's willing to go over the alignment with you and really like look at you on the screen and be like, okay, I see your foot's here. Can you move it a little bit over? You know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like it's kind of like being a fitness coach in a way. You want to make sure they're doing it right.
Mhm.
Like when
That
you go
makes
to the gym, you don't want to be doing the weight, like lifting the weights wrong. You don't want to
Yeah.
do the yoga poses wrong.
Yeah, no, that's actually really good advice because I never thought about it that way because it is exercise. So you could pull
Yeah,
something
you
potentially.
could. Yeah.
Yeah. So another thing too, like, what do you think people should like? What are like the benefits? Like, why should somebody practice yoga aside from maybe increased, intuition or maybe get stronger muscles? What do you think people really get out of it long term?
I think that like definitely just having better flexibility and strength. I mean, of course, like you shouldn't just do yoga. I say like you should do yoga and strength training, yoga and something else. But just having a yoga practice, like for example, if you're someone that likes to go to the gym a lot and you have a very vigorous workout and you're always working out those muscles, you want to balance it with something more softer, like a yoga practice. Yoga can be physically challenging for sure. So it's not like a super easy thing. Like if you're doing the poses right, like for example, Chaturanga Dandasana is high to low plank, that's a really hard pose. But a lot of people don't know how to do it right. So when they do it, they think, oh, this is easy, you know, but it's not easy when you do the pose right. But anyways, back to the benefits. It's just like anything else, build strengths, build flexibility, better breath, just like being able to really breathe consciously. Like there's a lot of benefits there. Because when you're in a yoga class, usually typically you start off with your breath. Like maybe they instruct you to do the Ujjayi breath, which is basically taking an exhale with your lips sealed. So it's like a soft or a light audible sound from the back of your throat. And that could be very healing. There's different types of breath work that you can use. In terms of like people who are trying to heal from trauma, yoga is considered a somatic practice. And it could be a very more of a gentle practice for someone that's trying to work with the body. Like if you have dissociation, you have a hard time feeling the body, you may want to do something that's focused more on physical movement rather than just because sometimes talking about your trauma could even trigger something within you. Like because at this time I'm going to school to become a therapist. So I focusing on trauma and I've learned that you shouldn't always think that someone wants to talk about their trauma, and I'm talking about people who have PTSD, not just anyone. So just doing movement instead of just talking about it can be very beneficial, and of course like it has to be trauma informed, but there's different benefits depending on who you are
Mhm.
and you need. And it's just kind of just good to have a practice because just the asana practice builds discipline, and that's part of yoga. Tapas is discipline, and that actually can help you make better decisions in terms of your habits and behaviors. Like, let's say you're trying to make better decisions with your diet. If you have a consistent practice, you're learning discipline, you're learning to do something because this is what I should be doing. And the more you do something every day, the less you are able to, like, I don't know, like get distracted or not prioritize the things that you should, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think too, whether it's trauma or maybe you don't necessarily need to use yoga for your trauma, but
Yeah.
you still feel like you accomplish something when you're done, which
Yeah.
I think is really nice too. Like personally, just as somebody who doesn't really know a lot about yoga, I'm glad that the first time I ever did it was a yin practice because it was pretty simple and straightforward, just, several different poses held for a couple of minutes. And I was able to just kind of like get a feel comfortable, and I had my own kind of breakthrough with it. I do feel like personally, if I went into like a yang practice, they're like, okay, like now we're gonna be like, woo, like it might have been too
Yeah.
much for me. So I think it's a good way to kind of like ease into it and kind of get a feel, especially if you are more of a spiritual person who wants to use it for like mind, body, soul connection, not just like body connection. I would, at least personally, I feel like yin was a really good way to start.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely a better, like if someone were to go in a vinyasa class and they're not taking the time to break down the poses, it could definitely be overwhelming and may make them not want to do it again. Like, oh, this
Mhm.
was too fast, the teacher wasn't paying attention, or they weren't, you know what I mean? Like, you don't want to feel like you don't know what you're doing because it doesn't make the person feel good. If they're in a room and they don't know what's going on, you want to be with someone that's going to break things down at first.
Mhm.
Someone that's going to be like a beginner's class for sure,
Yeah.
or a young class that's more slow,
Yeah,
more
for me, I definitely was more because honestly, I was nervous going into it because I was like, I don't know what to expect. I don't know, what if I'm not flexible enough or strong enough? So I was very nervous, but it was a great way to like ease into it.
yeah, cool.
So what was your like? How did you get into this?
I think I started when I was like 20. Was I 20? Yeah, I think I was 20, but I didn't really take it seriously until I went to the teacher training, at that time. For me, it was like learning to be in my body. I mean, to to be a little more personal, I was dealing with a lot of, just like dissociation, like just feeling very out of my body, and yoga is what helped me be more in my body. I didn't even really consider being a teacher until after I did the training. It was more for myself, um, and I think just my interest in learning different spiritual practices because I like to learn different spiritual practices, not just Hinduism, but like all sorts of things. And I'm kind of just open to different belief systems. And I think the type of person I am when I get into something, I want to really get into it, like the all or nothing, whatever Scorpio energy that I have.
Yeah.
So I think that had a lot to do with that. And then I don't know, I just noticed I like to teach. Maybe it's not just yoga. I could maybe in the future teach something else, but I do enjoy because teaching can be an art in itself. It's definitely a skill, you
Mhm.
know. And if
Yeah,
you
and I do
enjoy
know
teaching, yeah.
you do also like energy work, right? Or at least you used to?
I used to, yeah. I don't do it so much anymore. I think when I did do it, I felt drained.
Mm,
So it's probably because I was just too open to the other person, or maybe it was just a sign that this isn't for me. You
mhm,
know, like I think it served a purpose for me at that time, but it wasn't something I wanted to continue. I think I just was more led to like physical movement because that
mhm,
was my way of like integrating and healing. I really like I like movement. I like dance. I like expressing through movement.
mhm.
So I do appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I mean, I feel like if you're doing yoga, that is a spiritual kind of healing energy work thing. So, I mean, it kind of goes hand in hand, but it is more physical. Like with Reiki, I don't have to like, hold whatever
Yeah,
position.
exactly. And even like with hopefully, down the road doing therapy, that is more I mean, you do want to be open to the person's energy, but you're really not supposed to be too open because that creates transference
Mhm.
and projections. And so I kind of like practices that don't require me to be too open energetically. But in Reiki, I think you're able to cut that off, right? Like,
Yeah. Well, there's a
yeah.
lot of different ways you can protect yourself when you're doing it. You could use a symbol to protect your third eye. You could like dry bathe, cord cut, whatever before and after. But yeah, no, I get what you mean. If you're not careful, you can take on somebody's pain and then you're walking around feeling miserable for no reason if you're
Yeah.
not careful. Yeah. Do you feel like, what's been your experience being a yoga teacher? Like, do you think it's an easy thing to get into? Is it challenging? Like, what's been your experience?
Well, I definitely have always had like performance anxiety. So like in the beginning, it was like really nerve-wracking, like to be a teacher. But I think it's helped me find purpose. Like I feel good that, this is what I'm doing. I found something that I like. I don't think it's hard to get into. I think it's actually more easy now than it has been in the past because there's so many teacher programs right now. There's just a lot
Hmm.
of that available. And sometimes people do want to do it. Like, I feel like the people that end up teaching, they do it because they're really passionate about it. But there are people online that will say, like I said before, yoga is very franchised now. So like the practice of being a teacher isn't as I don't know, it's just about the asana, not all the other things. But yeah, I don't know. Like I'd say it's been well for me. It's been going well, and it hasn't been a thing where it was so hard for me to do. Like there wasn't many obstacles. Like I ended up being able to teach full time, and
Oh,
it worked out
cool.
for me. You know, so the fact that things worked out, I was like, "Okay, I guess this is something that's supposed to be,"
Yeah, it's
it's weird.
aligned.
You
Yeah.
know, I don't like, I believe in manifestation, but there's also a part of me that's kind of like like, I'm weird. I'm like I'm both, I don't know. But I wrote in my journal that like, "Oh, I wanna teach full time and I wanna live in Boston, like, in the Back Bay area," and I
Mhm.
ended up doing that. And I was like, "This is so weird. I can't like, what?" Like, I didn't even make the connection.
Yeah.
It's everything that I wanted as, like, it happened, but, like, I don't pay attention to stuff like that because I mean, I guess I manifest, but, like, when I do it, I just think of it in my mind, and it's there in my head, like, in my imagination, but, like, I don't, like, consciously, like I don't know, it's weird, like, I don't notice things, and then all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, wow, this is so weird," like, it
Yeah.
happened, so,
Yeah. Well, I
um
think effortless manifesting like that just means it's aligned. Because I think if you're trying
yeah.
to manifest something that's not for you, obviously it's not going to happen.
Yeah, because even, like, certain trips that I went on, like, I think about, like, "How did I do that?" Like, that was crazy, and then it's like, it must have been something that was meant to happen, and even this job that I got recently, with aerial yoga, the woman that I was talking to, she was like, "Oh, it's so interesting, we just opened up the training and you just came here for the interview, it was like it was meant to be or something." I was like, "Whoa." I don't know. I mean, I definitely love teaching, and I think no matter what I end up doing, like, I hope, maybe to go into different, fields, but it will be something that I would like to stick with, and it's like a lifetime thing because even if you're teaching for, like, 4 years, 10 years, there's still so much you can learn from alignment, physical alignment to philosophy to Sanskrit to the Vedas, like, there's just so much you can go into.
How do you think people, like, if they wanna learn, where do we start?
Well, I would definitely go into a teacher training that you resonate with. I always say it's not really feasible for a lot of people, like, go outside the States. Try to get your yoga teacher training from someone that's either been who's gone to India or that part of the world, because when I did my training, I went to a different part of the world. I went to Bali, and I felt like I was able to learn more about it authentically because the person that was teaching me, she was from Bali, she was from that part of the world, and it was like you were really getting the information from someone that genuinely practiced it. Not saying that people from the West don't, but all the stuff that we learn, we're getting it from the East, right? So, like,
Mhm,
I always say, if you can go to that part of the world or learn from someone that's spent years in an ashram or something, you're probably better off doing that because then you know that you're getting authentic information, like more
mhm.
than just the poses and all that. Like you're getting experience as well. Like there's just a few people I follow. I can probably come up with a list, but that's my advice. That's what I
Yeah,
would say.
I
But
think that's
again, that's not really feasible. So if you're in the States, just find a studio that really practices yoga more beyond the physical poses.
and I'm sure there's books too written
Oh,
by
yeah.
Indian people, yogis, whatever, so that's probably helpful too.
Yes. The Bhagavad Gita is one of those books, the Yoga Sutras. Um, I have one right here called The Heart of Yoga. That one's a good book.
Cool.
Yeah. So there's a few. I can come up with a list too if people are interested or
So
if you're
if
interested.
somebody wanted to work with you in particular, how they get a hold of you?
Instagram probably be the best because I'm on there a lot, or my Facebook page. So my Instagram, Caitlin, Caitlin Rose underscore yoga. And then I think my Facebook is Caitlin Rose Yoga.
Okay, and do you teach, like, do you do virtual classes or do we have to be in Boston?
I do. If it's requested, if someone's interested, I will. I just don't advertise it as much anymore because I just been busy doing in person
Yeah.
classes. But I'm definitely, available to do that.
Cool, cool. Well, thanks so much for being here.
Yeah.
Honestly, that was really interesting because I was wondering about, like, the whole demonic thing, and honestly, that makes so much sense that if it's associated with chakras and, like, intuition,
Yeah.
there's like, "A witch, you're a witch."
Everything is anything is just like everything's demonic, I
Yeah,
guess.
it's kind of annoying. Like, I've actually posted videos where I'm like, "I'm gonna send you love and light," and people are like, "You just possessed me with a demon." I'm like,
Okay. I mean, the way I think about it is if that's your mindset, you must like the person that is thinking like that, "Oh, you're possessing me," or whatever, your mindset is in you're thinking that. Like, you must be always in that state of, like, evil, like, because someone that's not thinking like that doesn't say to themselves like,
yeah,
"Oh," you know what I mean?
yeah,
Like, like, even when I'm around, like, haunted houses and stuff, if I go, I'm gonna be a little freaked out, but, like, I think to myself, if I don't believe that I'm gonna be possessed, would it have power over me still? Isn't it a mind
yeah.
thing, you know?
And I
That's the
think
way I see
sometimes
it.
it's that, like, the extra fear and belief, but I think also you can, like, allow it. Like, if I say, "Hey, like, I invite," then I think that that can affect it too,
Yeah,
for sure. But
sure.
anyways, let's not go down that rabbit hole.
I know, I'm, like, thinking about past situations.
But anyways, thank you so much for being on, and I'll have all her information below so you can go check her out. But thank you again, and we'll talk soon.
Alright, thanks,
All right.
guys.
Bye.